Before I begin today's session, let me just give you a quick, talk about the last session that we had, and since this is kind of a sister of that webinar. So in the previous webinar on CR, we discussed that what a student should do if he or she cannot rethink, if he or she is stuck at the pre-thinking stage. And one of the solutions we offered in that webinar was to identify the scope of the conclusion, and in that manner move forward with the pre-thinking. So if any of you haven't attended that webinar, you can always go back and watch the recording of that webinar. Now in today's webinar, we're going to talk about what else can be done to pre-think effectively, okay? And therefore, pre-think effectively, before we talk about that, it's very important to understand what are the problems a pre-thinker really faces, okay? So a pre-thinker, and I'm sure a lot of you will identify with this. You pre-think, okay, and many a times you feel clueless. You've read the paragraph, you've read the stimulus, and you really don't know which direction to pre-think in, okay? What should you really take up in order to pre-think? And what happens is, therefore, you start thinking in the wrong direction. So I'm just going to put up a poll here. How many of y'all have actually faced this problem? Let me just reset the poll. How many of y'all have faced this problem, guys? You have to start pre-thinking, but you don't know what you should pre-think, and you start pre-thinking in the wrong direction. So I've got a 100% answer on that, and I understand that. I sympathize. I feel bad. So this is one of the things that got us thinking that a pre-thinker, how would it be if a pre-thinker was actually given a direction in which to think? What would it be like if the pre-thinker, after reading the stimulus, could actually think in the right direction? It's like giving a small nudge that, okay, hey guy, go this way. Hey girl, move this side. All right. So continuing in that vein, this was one of the major problems that we believe a pre-thinker faces, okay? Thinking in the wrong direction, which means that often you come up with incorrect or very half-baked assumptions, all right? Because you were thinking in the wrong direction. And using those incorrect or half-baked assumptions, you move towards eliminating the answer choice, and the expected happens. You land up choosing the incorrect answer choice because you had not been able to really think or pre-think in the right direction. So we understood that there were questions where a student could actually be nudged into thinking in the right direction. There could be frameworks which would help a student think in the right direction. And that is how the framework was born. The pre-thinker's guide was born. These are simple frameworks which you can use to pre-think more efficiently and effectively. In today's session, we're going to talk about these frameworks and how you can use that framework to solve certain questions. All right. So before we talk about more about these frameworks, let us quickly talk about the kind of questions these frameworks are based on. So the four most common construction types. Now, when I say most common construction types, I'm not saying these are the only types, okay? But these are the most common construction types, and those of you who have been preparing for quite some time will, agree with me. So one of the typical argument types is the plan goal type, all right? Now, a plan goal question is very simple. It contains a plan with a specified goal, and then some details are given about the plan and the goal, or maybe just the plan or just the goal. And then the conclusion is usually about either the success or the failure of the plan. And you are asked to identify the assumption behind the plan, or you are asked to weaken the plan or strengthen the plan, and so on and so forth. So this is a typical construction type that you would have come across in your course of preparation. The other most common type is the causality-based questions, all right? So in this kind of a question, you have a causality in the conclusion of the argument. And what does this mean? It means that the conclusion contains a cause and effect, all right? So this is another very common question type that you will come across in the GMAT tests. The other two common types are comparison-based questions and quant-based questions. Now, we are going to talk about frameworks for the first two types. In our course at GMAT Wiz, we also teach these two frameworks, but in today's session, we're not going to discuss about these two frameworks, all right? These two frameworks are also where you come across questions where some comparisons are being made or quant-based concepts are being tested. Also, please remember, a lot of questions could be a combination of these types. Like you could have a combination of plan, goal, and causality, and so on and so forth. So without more ado, let me now talk about the frameworks. So the first framework that we're going to discuss today is going to be the plan goal arguments. Just a minute, guys. Hold on a sec. All right. So before I talk about the plan goal framework, what I want you to do is to attempt this question, all right, in the way you usually do. Now, this question, a lot of you might wonder while solving it, this question is not 700 difficulty level, but the purpose of this question is to initiate you into the plan goal framework. So bear with us because that is important. You'll be applying that framework for 700 level questions in this session, all right? So I'm going to give you exactly 2 minutes to solve this question, and then we are going to get started with explaining the framework to be used on plan goal kind of questions. All right. So I'm going to mute myself in the meantime and bring up the poll. All the best, guys. Okay, I'm going to count 10. So if you're ready with your answers, please put in the polls. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. Let me end the poll. Okay, guys. So as explained earlier and as expected, most of you have got this question right, but that was not the aim of this question. The aim of the question is to explain the framework that you can use in much more difficult questions, which are going to come up in the session next. So follow me when I explain the framework. It'll be easier to understand with the help of this question, which is all right. So let me quickly start by explaining the framework. Now, what is crucial to this framework, guys, is that you must have analyzed the stimulus correctly. As discussed in the previous webinar, it is crucial that you analyze the stimulus, you understand the argument, you understand the conclusion and the scope of the argument for anything to work. So the framework works only if you have understood the stimulus correctly. This framework is to be applied during the pre-thinking stage, all right? So this was the question. And we had to identify what the farmers have assumed while devising the plan. So basically, you have to identify the assumption that has gone behind devising the plan. All right. Now let's see. So let's quickly understand the stimulus first and foremost. In order to protect their crops from devastation by pests, the farmers of Lesotho have decided to introduce a species of black ants. So the first sentence of the passage is basically a premise, and it talks about a plan and goal. All right. The plan is to introduce a species of black ants, and the goal is to protect rice crops from devastation by pests. Second sentence, research conducted on the ants says that these ants secrete liquids that are absorbed by the soil and help the plants to ward off the pests that year after year harm the yields. It's a long sentence here, and it talks about a third party finding here. So the third party finding presents the mechanism of the plan. That is how the plan is going to work. The plan is that the liquid secreted by the black ants will be absorbed by the soil, and it will help the plants to chase the or ward off the pests. And the other piece of information is the pests reduce the yields by half year after year. All right. Therefore, the farmers are expecting full yields in the coming season. So based on the second premise, a conclusion is drawn by the author that the coming season the yields will be full. All right, great. So we have to identify what the farmers assumed when they were devising this plan. So basically, the assumption behind the plan. Now, this is a part which gets interesting because this is where we are going to talk about the framework. Clear? So I want you guys to really take notes if you want, because you're going to use this framework in further questions. All right. So if you have your paper pencils ready, bring them on. Okay. Now, since we have established in the first step there is a plan and goal, and we have to identify the assumption behind the plan, we can put into place the framework for the plan and goal questions. So what is this framework? The first step in the framework is to identify the exact plan. Now, you have to be very clear about what the plan is. Sometimes the plan is worded in a very difficult language, okay? A long sentence may have just 4 words which actually convey the plan. So during the learning stage, you could use rough notes to jot down the plan in a short phrase, all right? In our example, the plan is to introduce a species of black ants. We've got to be precise there. The second step sort of is to identify the exact goal. Again, you have to be very precise while identifying the goal. What is it to stop the devastation, or to increase the profits, or to do what? In this case, it is very specifically to protect their rice crops from devastation. Again, so the goal here is to protect the rice crops from pests. All right, that's the exact goal of the plan. So that is the second step. Now, the third step is to follow the guidelines. What are these guidelines? Now, think along the 3 lines, but always remember to think within the scope of the applicant. First thing is what happened during the planning stage. Since it's a plan, guys, all right? So clearly the first step of the framework is to think what the planners might have thought of during the planning stage. And when you're trying to think in this direction, use the information that is already given in the passage to think to pre-think correctly, okay? And then think of some unknown factor that would impact the goal. What do I mean by this? Say, for example, the findings of the research is what the plan is based on. Since the findings of the research is a third-party finding, it is open to debate, okay? So this is the given information, and now you're going to think about situations where this third-party finding may lead to an assumption. So what if, for example, if the findings of the research are not correct? In that case, what will happen is the black ants may not, the plan of the black ants, using the black ants, may not be very effective, and that would really break the conclusion. All right. So the first assumption that the author has made is that the research findings are accurate and will work as expected. All right. The farmers have assumed this. So very simple, right? Given information. All right. Let me ask you guys this question here first. So 1 second, just let me reset the poll. So is this step clear to you guys? How to use this step? The first thing that you do is you think about what happened during the planning stage, and for that you use some of the information that is given and expand on that. So we are talking about giving you the right direction. Great, wonderful. I have some no's on that, so let me just quickly explain. The first step in the framework was to identify the plan and the goal. The second step is to follow 3 guidelines. First guideline is you think what could have happened during the planning stage, since we are talking about the assumption behind the plan. So for thinking about what happened during the planning stage, you can use some information which is already given in the passage. The information that is already given is the research conducted said that this is going to happen. So what if that research, that third-party finding is not true? All right. So you can raise questions there and see if you can come up with some assumption. So clearly here, the assumption is whatever the research is saying the black ants will do, it will do. That assumption has been made by the farmers when they are thinking of putting the plan into action. All right, clear? So, okay, all right, fine. I think that's clear to most of you. So let's now move to the second step. So that is how we come up with one assumption. The next guideline that you can follow is what happened during the execution stage. That is when the plan was carried out, or when the plan might be carried out. If it has not already been carried out, you can think ahead about what might happen when the plan will be carried out. Again, here, consider what is given about the steps taken to execute the plan, and think about some adverse effect or fallout of that plan that would impact the goal, that would change the plan. For example, in this case, the farmers have just decided to introduce black ants. Okay, so no information is given about this aspect as to what really will happen when the black ants are actually introduced. Okay, but we can think ahead, we can pre-think, remember. So the passage talks about one effect of the black ants, that is, they are going to secrete liquids which will be absorbed by soil. But what about alternate effects of the black ants that could affect the conclusion? What about that? What if the black ants start eating away at the plants themselves? We don't know whether they will eat the plants or not, right? If that happens, then the yields would probably be saved from the pests, but would again be devastated by the black ants. So the assumption that is being made here is the black ants themselves will not feed on the plants. So we have come up with another assumption using the guideline, what happened during the execution stage. Now, does that end here? No. What happened during the execution stage? We can think a little more. Let's see. What if the plants absorb the liquid secreted by ants and that reduces the plant yield? I mean, we are talking about the effect of the liquids on the pests, but what about the effect of the liquids on the plants themselves? We don't know about that. If the plants are harmed, then the yields again would be devastated. So another assumption made by the farmers here is that the liquid secretions will not cause any harm to the crops so as to reduce the yields. All right. Okay, more to come. See, using the right direction, the right framework, you can think more. What if the plants absorb the liquid secreted and that reduces the, I'm so sorry. What if, 1 second, just let me hold on. There's a problem here. Okay. The third guideline is to find a connection between the plan and the goal. So let me just wait there. Was the second step clear to all of you guys? So let me just put up a poll once again. Hold on a sec. Was the second step clear to you? Could you see how you came up with two more assumptions, just thinking in the right direction? Great, great. Everybody's got that. So again, I've got some people who haven't understood that clearly. I'll just go over it very, very briefly. So in the second stage, in the first stage, you were thinking, in the first guideline, you were thinking what happened during the planning stage. Now, in the second step, you are thinking what happened during the execution stage of the plan, or what might happen during the execution stage of the plan. So DJ here is asking a question, and very pertinent question, DJ. Do we have that much time to come up with so many assumptions? DJ, you don't have to try to come up with more than one assumption in the exam, all right? But this is a way to show you that the assumptions are many, and you can come up with one assumption thinking on different lines. Is that clear? The idea is not that once you come up with one assumption, you should try thinking for more assumptions. It's not like that. In the 10-15 seconds that you spend on pre-thinking, if you're able to come up with one assumption, it's enough. Also remember, when you are going to use this framework, you may not be able to come up with an assumption for every stage, all right? Therefore, the framework has enough to cover all the various aspects, all right? Okay, so don't worry about the time. You're not supposed to kind of go on thinking and thinking. It's just that there is a framework. Put your analysis in the framework and see what you can come up with and move on. Okay, so let me move on also. The final guideline of the framework is what is the connection between the plan and the goal. So if you've already come up with an assumption in the first guideline, you can stop there. If you've already come up with an assumption in the second guideline, you can stop there. Or you can go forward. So what is the connection between the plan and the goal? Now you can look for a missing link. Okay, that is mandatory for connecting the plan to the goal. So any piece of information which is necessary for connecting the dots between the plan and the goal. Okay. Now this piece of information will be something that has not been given. For example, in this case, the farmers are expecting full yield this season. Okay. And they are thinking that this because they expect the black ants to drive away the pests. What if something other than pests causes devastation to the crops in the coming season? Okay. So clearly the farmers here, let's say, for example, what if some weather condition causes damage to the crops? All right. In that case, also the yields can be harmed and the conclusion will break down. So clearly the farmers have assumed that nothing else apart from the pests will cause any harm to the crops to reduce the yields. So we've come up actually with 4 assumptions, guys. And again, as DJ pointed out, let me also tell you this once again, you don't have to think of all the assumptions. The idea is to come up with at least 1 and even 2 if you can quickly using the framework. But I want to ask you guys, were you able to come up with these assumptions when you were really reading the stimulus or, on your own? Let me just put up a poll here. So can you see how easy it was to come up with so many assumptions which you normally would not have come up with? Okay. And imagine using this framework in a very difficult question. Okay. So I think I'm just going to reset this because some of you may not have got that. My question is, guys, were you able to see how easy it was to come up with assumptions using the framework? So, okay, Aman says third one he came up with yes. Harsh says not all of them. That's okay, Harsh. Even if you can come up with 1, and again, this was an easy question, all right? For tougher questions, before you start pre-thinking, if you are completely lost, you don't know, what direction to think in, then this is very handy. Okay, it's a plan and goal. Let me think of what happened during the planning stage. Let me think of what happened during the execution stage. Let me think of anything else that connects the plan and the goal, any missing piece of information. Okay. So yes, Kaustav. Kaustav says the last assumption was easy. Yes, Kaustav, it was easy. The only thing is the answers could have been anything. All right. So let me quickly take you, and I'll really be quick on this one with the answer choice analysis, since most of you all got that right. So once we are armed with those 4 assumptions, we will go into eliminating the answer choices. Okay. So the first answer choice, very small percentage of you chose this. The yields coming this season will fetch higher profits. Now, please understand the conclusion was concerned with full yields taking place and not the profits that are going to be fetched by those yields. All right. So this is completely out of scope and is incorrect. Now, there's a very interesting thing I'll show you on this. Okay. If you look at choice B, what does choice B say? Choice B says the secretions of the black ants add nitrogen to the soil, which helps in enhancing the taste of the secretions of the black ants add nitrogen to the soil, which helps in enhancing the taste of the rice grains. Now, a lot of you might have, I have had students choosing this as the correct answer often, but remember, it's not a must be true condition. It's definitely a strengthener. And if you try the negation technique on this, the trial by negation technique, you will realize it does not break the conclusion. Even if no nitrogen is added to the soil by the secretions, the yields can still be expected to be full. All right. So this is not the correct answer choice. It's just a strengthener that says that yes, the full yields might take place. All right. Let's move to the third choice. Black ants are herbivores and are known to have a voracious appetite. Now, this actually indicates that the black ants might eat away at the rice plants too. If they feel so hungry, and they are plant eaters, herbivores means plant eaters, they might eat the plants, and this therefore weakens the choice, weakens the conclusion. Let's move to D. This was the correct answer, and almost 95% of you chose this. All other conditions required for proper plant growth will remain favorable. That has been assumed by the farmers when devising the plan. They have not figured into the plan if some other weather condition might spoil their. Okay. Choice E, the farmers have decided to go for pest-resistant variety of seeds in the coming season. This choice seems to imply, actually goes against the intention of the passage. It implies the farmers have they don't have faith on the black ant plan, and they might not want to go for it. So this choice is also. So I hope you guys have noted down the framework. You have understood what you're supposed to do. I'll do a quick recap before I give you the 700 plus level question. All right. So the first step is to identify the plan and goal precisely. And it's very important that you be very precise about it, guys. All right. Just give me a moment. It's very important you be precise about it. And then you use the 3 guidelines. Again, you don't have to use all the guidelines, but whichever guideline gives you an assumption first, use that. So what happened during the planning stage? Okay, use the given information to come up with not given information. What happened during the execution stage? Use the given information to come up with what is not given. And then try to identify what is required to achieve the goal. So the gap between the plan and the goal. Okay, what is the connection between the plan and the goal? So here's the question for you guys. It's an official question. It's a 700 plus level question, and you have exactly 2 minutes starting now. All right, I'm going to count 10 before I end the poll. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. So please mark your choices, and I'm going to end the poll. All right, here goes. All right. So now let me ask you a question first. So how many of y'all, so Ashwin is asking, is it a 700 level question? Yes, Ashwin, it is. You can kind of look that up, but it's a 700 level question. There was an interesting question that earlier Ketan was asking. All right, Ketan was asking, what if 2 of the 4 assumptions are found during the found in the options? Ketan and the others, you will never find more than 1 correct answer choice on the answer choices. Okay, so even if you're able to come up with more than 1 assumption, rest assured that the correct answer will, I mean, the answer choices will just have 1 correct assumption. All right. Okay. So now I was going to ask you guys something. I wanted to ask you how many of y'all used pre-thinking, I mean the framework here. And I want you to be honest. You can just give me the answers in the chat. Did you guys try to apply the framework? And the answers I would like you to give in the chat. Did you try to apply the framework? Yes. Okay, so let's see. Sam, yes. Akshat, yes. Neelab, yes. Sanchit says no. Anjali, no. Okay, so it's that I understand that you might think that this is time consuming and you might not want to apply it. So Yogi says not fully. Bruno says there was no time. Again, see, you've got to be really fast about it. All right, and I'm going to show you how to do that. All right. So Kanika says no. Sandy found it hard. It will take time for you to practice this. You have to get it pat. All right. And as I said, one of the prerequisites for being able to apply the framework is that you should have understood the stimulus correctly. All right. Okay. So Bhavesh has given a very interesting reply. He says that he tried using the framework, at least some structured approach, it seems, but could not distinguish between a couple of answer choices. That's fair enough, Bhavesh, okay? But the framework does give you a direction in which to think, I think, and we will see. So Harsh says he came up with one assumption. All right, okay, great. All right, so I think I'm going to now discuss how the framework could have been applied based on this question. All right. Before that, let me also discuss the results of the poll. As you can see, so 11% of you marked choice A, 34% of you marked choice B, 11% of you marked choice C, 7% D, and another 34% marked E. So it's really between B and E, it seems. Okay, so let me move ahead with the discussion on this question. Now, the first step here would be to understand the stimulus properly, guys. And I want you guys to follow very closely how I am analyzing the stimulus. We have already discussed this in the previous webinar. So if you're not able to analyze the stimulus correctly, you will not be able to pre-think, you will not be able to apply the framework also. 12 years ago and again 5 years ago. So we're talking about 2 times in the past, all right? We are talking about 2 times in the past. There were extended periods, so there were long periods when the Darfur Republic's currency, the Pundra, was weak. So twice in the past, for long periods, Darfur's currency was weak. Okay, fine. Its value was unusually low relative to the world's most stable currencies. So this portion is actually merely extra information given to you to talk about how low it really was. It was really low when compared to the other stable currencies of the world. All right. Both times, a weak Pundra made Darfur's manufactured products a bargain on world markets. Now, what does it mean? Made a bargain? Made a bargain means Darfur's manufactured products were cheaper on the world markets compared to other manufactured products on the world market. Okay, and this was possible because the Pundra was weak. The currency of Darfur was weak compared to the other currency. And Darfur's exports were up substantially. So what was the impact of the weak Pundra both the times in the past? One, the products were cheaper on the world market and the exports were much high, very high, okay? The exports increased. Fine, so this is all about the past. Now, so now we're talking about the present. Some politicians are saying, what are they saying? In order to cause, now in order to often is an indicator of a plan to come. So if you're trying to recognize the language, okay? In order to cause another similarly sized increase in exports. So when I say similarly sized increase, it means the same size as was witnessed those 2 times in the past. So some politicians are saying that if you want to have a similar increase in exports as the past, the government should allow the Pundra, okay, the government should allow the Pundra to become weak again. All right, so this is what the government, the politicians are explaining. All right, so the stimulus basically is very simple now. Twice in the past, Darfur's currency was weak. As a result of that, Darfur's manufactured products became cheap on the world market and the exports of Darfur increased. Now the politicians are saying that if you want to increase the exports to a similar level, you should again make the Pundra weak. You should deliberately weaken the Pundra. Okay. So let us now understand the question stem as well. I think one of you was asking what kind of question it is. It is, and you asked whether it was a weekend question. Yes, it was a weekend question. Which of the following, if true, provides the government with the strongest grounds to doubt? So to doubt means we are clearly going to weaken something, that the politician's recommendation will achieve its aim. So basically, we have to weaken the politician's recommendation. We have to prove that their recommendation will not achieve its aim. That is, it will not be able to increase its exports. That's the aim, right? Okay. So see, the identification of the conclusion is very important. In order to cause another similar sized increase in exports, the government should allow the Pundra to become weak again. So And the basis is twice in the history, the weak Pundra led to high exports. And if we really have to identify the scope of the argument, that is what kind of answer choice we are looking for, then we are looking for any new piece of information that shows that weakening the Pundra will not cause another similar size increase in exports. So far, are you guys clear? So let me ask you a question here. Just give me a moment. And this is important, guys. Okay. So, okay, there are a few questions here. Let me just quickly say, what are the questions? The pre-thinking, so Harsh is asking, the pre-thinking process should happen before reading the stem or after? So Harsh, let me again clarify here. Part of the pre-thinking, that is kind of shadow answer, starts to form when you are reading the stimulus. And that is why reading the stimulus clearly is very, very important. Understanding the stimulus clearly is very important, all right? So Sanjay is saying that only after reading the stem. Sanjay, you will agree with me that sometimes a certain sort of answer starts to form vaguely in your mind when you are reading the stimulus and you're reaching the conclusion. So I wouldn't say strictly that the pre-thinking starts only afterwards, but the deliberate or purposeful pre-thinking starts only after. The framework has to be applied only after you have understood the stimulus. All right. So I think that clears the stuff. Now, my question to you guys is, how many of y'all understood the stimulus exactly like this? How many of y'all understood the stimulus exactly like this? Because if you did not understand the stimulus in this manner, then that means you won't be able to apply the framework. So first step is to have a very clear understanding of the stimulus. So I've got about 80% saying that they understood the stimulus like this, and there is a small percentage which says they were not able to understand the stimulus in this manner. Okay, so then let's see that. So if 85% and plus of you understood the stimulus in this manner, what went wrong? Okay, because a very small percent got the answer right. All right. Okay, so let's move forward. Now here is where we are going to apply our framework, and I want you to watch closely. We'll identify the exact plan and the goal. The plan, or in this case the recommendation, is weaken the Pundra again, and the goal is to cause another similarly sized increase. So this is important. Similarly sized increase in exports. Okay. All right. Now we've got to use the 3 guidelines, right? What's the first guideline? What happened during the planning stage? Now, when the planning, therefore the politicians, when they were giving the recommendation now, at present, what were they thinking? Very clearly, they were thinking whatever happened in the past will also happen at present. That's a very simple enough understanding, right? They assume that what played out in the past will play out again now. So they might actually have assumed the conditions that were there in the past are also currently present, and so on and so forth. So very simple. It's a very simple understanding that you will draw up when you think about what happened during the planning stage. That is what happened when the politicians are saying to weaken the Pundra again. They are believing a repeat of the history is possible. All right. So how many of y'all thought this, guys? How many of y'all thought this? One second. Let me just reset the poll. How many of y'all thought along these lines? And be very honest with yourselves. How many of y'all thought that the politicians have assumed history will repeat itself? Great. So if you were able to think that, very good. Okay. And for a lot of you who haven't been able to think that, almost 30% of you, you can use this framework to push your minds into thinking in the right direction. All right. I want you to notice that. Okay. So Akshay says, yes, he was able to think of this. So Akshay, did you use the framework and think this? Akshay, did you use the framework and think this? Okay. All right. So let me now move forward with the second step. What happened during the execution stage? So the politicians assumed, so what happened during the execution stage does not necessarily mean we are only going to talk about in the past tense. Basically, that's a way of framing the guideline. But the point here is the politicians are suggesting that the Pundra become weak again. So let's say if the Pundra is weakened, what then? What might happen at this stage? Yes. So if the Pundra is made weak, they are expecting what to happen? They're expecting the exports to increase. Export of what? Manufactured products. From where will the manufactured products come? Obviously, from the manufacturing industry of Darfur, right? So it means Darfur's manufacturing industry must be able to produce enough manufactured products for Darfur to be able to export that much, right? Okay. So if you're thinking along these lines, using the information given in the stimulus, you will probably think, and if you're trying to weaken, maybe the manufacturing industries cannot produce enough to achieve similar sized exports. How many of y'all were able to come up with this? How many of y'all were able to come up with this actually? So Nilab says, I thought the politicians did not assume any other factor to increase exports. And that is exactly, Nilab, what we are trying to streamline for you. So when we say politicians assumed that everything will be the same, it means that they did not think of anything else. So that is kind of in the right direction, yes. Harsh says he feels the adjectives play a major role in these 700 type of questions. Harsh, in my experience, one thing that I've seen is GMAT does not waste any words. If an adjective has been put in, there's a reason anywhere. Okay. For example, here, similarly sized increase. Very, very clearly, it means that you're supposed to think in a certain manner. So, okay, Akshay says he was not able to think about the second point. All right. So, can all of you see? So, let me again start the poll here. Can all of you all see how we can use the framework to come up with assumptions or weakness for that matter? Can all of you all see this, guys? Even if you were not able to think of it, can you see how it can be used and how it can make thinking easier for you? All right. I wanted you guys to say yes, and you have. Thank you so much. Let's look at the third stage here. Third, what is the connection between the plan and the goal? That means for the goal to be achieved, since we are supposed to weaken the goal achievement part, for the goal to be achieved, what is necessary here? What should happen? Yes, you can give me your answers in the chat boxes, guys. For the goal, that is for a similarly sized increase in exports, what has to take place? Come on, try. The plan is to increase the exports and the goal is to make the Pundra weak. So, what is required for the goal to be achieved? Plain and simple. Here we are not thinking of weakening, but think. Yes, the goal, yes, increase in export is the goal, Neeraj. But for that to happen, and the Pundra has to be weakened, this we know, Sandy says. So, what is the link between that? If I'm going to weaken the Pundra, automatically the exports will not increase, right? Something will happen in between. Kostav says production has to increase. Yes, Kostav, we have already figured that out in the execution stage. DJ says more supply to cater to more demand. DJ, more demand. Nowhere in the passage are we told there will be more demand. Very good, DJ. You thought of that, but you have to think of it in a reverse manner. Okay. More supply we have thought during the execution stage, but we haven't figured in more demand. What if the demand for Darwit's products is not there in the world market? Can you see that, guys? So Shreya talks about supply demand. Very good, Shreya. Nikhil says enough manufactured products. See, Nikhil, that part is true. Okay. But demand will increase this time also. Very good, Aman. Aman says that the demand for the products will be there this time around. Harsh also says demand would remain at least the same. Oh, good. Very good, Akshay. Weak Pundra, more production. Nilab says to increase supply. So increasing supply we have already covered in the execution stage. What else connects the plan and the goal? For the goal to be achieved, people should want to buy the products on the world market, right? Okay. Can you see that, all of you? So Aman says products will become a bargain this time also. Yes, Isaac says that the demands for goods increases. Very good, Isaac. Okay, the demand also should increase. So in the second stage, we're already talking about production should be enough. In the third stage, we're going to talk about there should be demand. Neeraj, very good. Arjun talks about cheap exports. Yes, Rutika talks about demand increases. Very good, Rutika. So you guys can see that if you are using the framework, you will be pushed into thinking in various directions. All right. So how many? No, okay, let me just bring up a poll because this is important. Listen to the question first. How many of y'all thought about the demand angle before discussion, just now, before we discussed? If you did not think of it, just answer a no. If you thought of this point that the demand will increase, so just a small and be honest about it, guys. We are all here to discover something new, something different, something easier that will make our journey easier. So a very small percent of you were able to think about the demand angle before the discussion, but a very good 70% of you were able to think about the demand angle once we brought up the framework. Very good, guys. Thank you so much. That just proves that the framework is really effective. You just have to get used to it. DJ says, I only thought of it after going through the choices. Yes, DJ, that also happens often. Okay. So Ashwin is asking a good question here. How come demand can be related to confusion? How can we intuitively think? So think about it like this, Ashwin. Okay. We are talking about increasing exports, right? And we are only talking about the supply part. But in order to increase the exports, for the exports to go up really, somebody has to buy those goods, right? So automatically the demand portion comes into the picture. If there isn't ample demand for Darfur's manufactured products on the world market, then you cannot increase the exports even after increasing the, weakening the Pundra. So is that clear? Ashwin, is that clear? So Harsh says he did not think of it directly. He thought the countries importing would still be interested. Again, that is the assumption, Harsh. That's exactly what we're trying to identify here. Good. Sanchit says still confused how we will have the time to think this much. So Sanchit, think about it like this. You have to practice it. When you are practicing plan goal questions during your preparation, every time you see a plan goal, you think of three things. The moment you get hold of one idea based on one of the guidelines, you can stop there. You don't have to think it out through. But this is something that you have to practice. You have to make it a habit, right? See, for example, when you learn a new formula, okay, in Quant, all right. So once you learn that new formula, you have to learn to apply it, right? You have to learn to remember the formula. You have to learn to apply it, all right. And that takes time. Perfecting the application of the formula takes time. Can you see that, Sanchit? Can you see that? Yes? Okay, great. So I think we've covered all the aspects here. Now let me, therefore, the thing that connects the plan and the goal is there should be similar demand for Darfur's exports. So this is a learning for you. Whenever we are talking about exports and imports and prices and currencies, think about all the aspects, all right? So very clearly you can see now, you can see on this screen how if you can come up with any one of these, it means you're on the right track. You don't have to follow all the three guidelines. You can just quickly follow, okay, what happened during the planning stage? Okay, I can't think of anything. Let me think of what happened during the execution. Actually, what if they're not able to produce enough? Or what if there isn't enough demand? So like this is how you're going to use the guideline. All right. Okay, great. Let's now move forward to the answer choice elimination stage using these three kind of answers that we've come up with. Choice A. Several of the politicians now recommending that the Pundra be allowed to become weak. So what this sentence means is we're talking about the politicians who are now recommending the Pundra to be made weak, made that same recommendation before each of the last two periods of currency weakness. So what this choice is really telling us that the politicians making the recommendation now are the same ones as before. Okay, the recommendations is same and the people making the recommendation is same. Does that help us any which how? No. Who is making the recommendation is not of any consequence. Okay, it does not tell us that exports cannot be increased. Okay, who recommends it does not tell us that the goal will not be achieved, and therefore choice A is incorrect. All right, quite some 12% of you chose choice A. Okay, uh, those of you who chose choice A, can you see why it is incorrect? Those of you who chose choice A, can you see why it is incorrect? Great. Let me now move to the next choice. After several decades of operating well below peak capacity. So this portion is talking about Darfur's manufacturing sector. All right. So after Darfur's manufacturing sector was working well below peak capacity. So let's say if the peak capacity was X, that is the maximum amount that the manufacturing sector could produce. For a long time, for years, the sector was producing much below that. So that sector is now operating at near peak levels. So now it is kind of almost producing X. All right. What this choice really tells us that earlier Darfur sector had the scope to increase the output. Okay. When the Punra was weak in the past, because at that point of time it was operating well below peak capacity. Now it is already at full capacity, near peak levels, which means even if the Punra is made weak, perhaps the manufacturing industry cannot be pushed much to increase its output. Okay, and this therefore tells us that even if Punra is made weak, that was the recommendation, make it weak. This is directly hitting on that recommendation that even if you make the Punra weak, since the manufacturing of the products cannot be increased, therefore a similar size increase in exports may not be achievable. And therefore, choice B very clearly weakens our conclusion. Okay, 34% of you marked that, guys. Okay, so the other 66% of you who did not mark it, I'm talking about people who rejected choice B. Can you see why it is the correct choice? And how, if you were really using the framework to think, you could have arrived at this answer. Okay, great. So let me just quickly look at some of your questions in the chat box. So Nilab says, if there is not enough demand, the plan will still not be successful. Whether, yes, Nilab, absolutely. If there is not enough demand, the plan will not be successful. Okay. DJ has a question here. For weakening questions, is it wise not to pre-think and proceed to read the 5 choices? So DJ, in my experience, I have seen this, that if you have not really thought out the stimulus properly, when I say thought out the stimulus properly, I'm talking about the stimulus analysis, including the pre-thinking. Often you are going to land up making the wrong choices, especially for the difficult questions. So it's always wise to think a bit, even if you don't have to spend some 40-50 seconds on pre-thinking. If you can just spend 10-15 seconds, that's ample. If you cannot think of anything at that point of time, and with the assumption that you have understood the stimulus well, you can proceed forward. So Sandy is asking for an explanation of B again. Sandy, I'll quickly tell you. Choice B is saying that in the past, the manufacturing industries were not producing to their maximum capacity. Okay, there was still scope to increase the production in the past. So when the Punra became weak in the past, the manufacturing sector tried to increase its capacity, and therefore it produced more goods, and therefore exports were it was possible to increase the exports. And this sentence is also saying that it is now operating at near peak levels. That means now it is producing the maximum it can. So it cannot produce more. So if you want to increase the exports more than the current level, you cannot do it. Is that clear, Sandy? Akshay is asking from where I could have analyzed that the production is at the peak. So Akshay, Reading the stimulus is very important. Equally important is understanding the answer choices. So if you look at choice B, it says Darfur's manufacturing sector is now operating at near peak levels. Near peak means almost as its maximum production capacity. So that is how you can analyze that the production is at its peak currently. Rutika, I will come to option E, so please hold on. Near peak levels. Operating at peak levels does not mean we are talking about profits or costs. Okay. Manufacturing sector operating at peak level. What is the function of manufacturing sector? To manufacture goods. All right. I will talk about option E, Nilab. Just give me a moment. 1 decade is 10 years. So several decades is at least 20 years, Sanchit. All right. At least 20 years or within that period. Is that clear to all of you? Okay, great. So I'm going to move forward to the other choices. All right. Here comes choice C. Let's see what it says. The economy of a country experiencing a rise in exports. Now, here notice we're talking about a country which is already experiencing a rise. All right. Will become healthier. Okay, so it will become more healthy. The economy will become more healthy only if the country's currency is strong. So this choice is actually talking about a situation which does not exist. Okay, this is talking about an economy of a country which is already going through an increase. So this is not per what our stimulus is saying, and it is talking about the economy becoming healthier, which is not the concern of our argument. All right, it is not the concern of our argument. So therefore, choice C is incorrect. Okay, we were supposed to weaken the fact that exports can be increased. This choice is telling us about a country which is already experiencing rise in exports. Therefore, this choice is nowhere near weakening the conclusion. Let's move to choice D quickly. Not too many of you have marked this. Those countries whose manufactured products compete with Darfur's on the world market, okay, all currently have stable currencies. Now, what this choice does is tells us that all competitor countries have stable currencies. It indicates that the competing countries are unlikely to compete. So it actually strengthens the politician's recommendation. Can you see this? It tells us that Darfur can actually increase its imports by weakening the Pundra because the other currencies are stable, the other currencies are not weak. And if Darfur weakens its currency, it can actually garner a bargain again. So this choice actually is a strengthener and is therefore incorrect. Now I'm going to come to choice E, guys. So there were 34% of you who chose the correct choice, choice B, and I hope for the correct reasons, and equal 34% who went for choice E, which is why this is a 700 plus level difficulty question. Okay. So now what does choice E say? And I want all of you who wanted explanations for choice E to pay very close attention to what I'm going to say. Choice E says, a sharp improvement in the efficiency of Darfur's manufacturing plants. So it is basically saying that manufacturing plants should become more efficient, first of all. So if manufacturing plants became more efficient, all right, what will happen? It will make the products a bargain again, correct? Products bargain again, all right? So what this choice is saying, and it is further saying that you don't have to without weakening the Pundra. Now understand, guys, the recommendation that you have to weaken is Pundra should be weakened, correct? This choice is telling you don't have to weaken the Pundra. Does it weaken the recommendation? Does it weaken the recommendation, or does it offer an alternative method? I'm going to ask you this question, wait. So just hold on. Just give me a moment. Okay. Does choice E weaken the recommendation? All of you. Does choice E weaken the recommendation? Yes? Does choice E weaken the recommendation, guys? A lot of you are saying yes, a small percent of you are saying yes. And so let me put it this way. You have to weaken plan X. Okay. Let me end this poll because I don't think you've got the question right. What I'm asking is, you have to weaken plan X. Now you are saying there is another plan Y. Does that weaken plan X? This is not a cause and effect question, guys. Okay. You were supposed to weaken plan X. You are saying there is another plan Y which might work. Does that automatically weaken plan X? Sure, this is an alternative plan. Maybe you don't have to weaken the Pundra. All right. But does it say that weakening the Pundra will not achieve the goal? No. And that is why E is not correct. So let me ask this question. I think Nilab was asking for E. Nilab, is it clear? Rutika, is it clear why E cannot be the answer? Rutika and Nilab and the others who have chosen E, is it clear to you? Let me just end the poll and ask. Those of you who chose E, is it clear why E is not the answer? Are you clear why E is not the answer? E is suggesting an alternate plan. It is not weakening the current plan. It is not weakening the recommendation. It is just suggesting another recommendation. Great. Okay. So Sanchit says it's a new suggestion. Absolutely, Sanchit. It's a new suggestion, and automatically a new suggestion does not weaken the current suggestion. For weakening the current suggestion, you have to actively show that the current suggestion will not achieve its aim. And that is not happening with E. So Ashwin is asking, can we eliminate C purely on the basis of only? I would not suggest you do that, Ashwin. Always make sure you read out the full sentence, all right? You never know what kind of traps might be there, all right? Okay. So I think we don't have any questions. So Ashwin is asking a question here. Without any weakening, can be considered as extra information in the data starting with, and can we ignore option E? So again, Ashwin, I would say do not ignore any choice without understanding the full implication of the choice. I have experienced it personally. Sometimes in a hurry to quickly solve the question, we actually land ourselves in trouble. See, what would you have? Would you have a higher accuracy and a better percentile than, saving time to answer all the questions equally well? That's a strategy question, but that doesn't really help. Sometimes in your hurry, you think you're actually saving time, but you're not, because you are taking the same amount of time rereading portions, all right? So I would not suggest that, Ashwin, to read only portions, okay? So let me quickly round that off. This choice means there is an alternate way to increase DARPA's exports, okay? But that does not mean that the recommended way will not work, and therefore choice E is incorrect. So the takeaway from this is, please use the framework whenever you solve your plan goal questions. I have found it to be really helpful, and with practice you can really get a good hang of it. Okay, I'm sure you would have faced questions in plan and goal questions where you couldn't think of anything. So you could perhaps use these 3 guidelines to think on the correct lines and come up with proper assumptions. All right. So next we are going to come up with the next framework of the evening, causal arguments. Okay. Now, how many of y'all are familiar with what is a causal argument, guys? How many of y'all are familiar with what is a causal argument? Let me just reset the poll here quickly. How many of y'all know what is causality and what is a causal argument? All right. So almost 100% of you know that. Great. So I'm just going to be quick about it. All right. I'm not going to spend too much of time here. So a causality is basically, in a lot of GMAT CR questions, the stimulus contains a cause and effect relationship, which means there is an event A which causes event B. All right. And the event A is the cause and event B is the effect of that particular cause. So, for example, the unusually low amount of rainfall this year caused or led to or resulted in low production of corn. So here event A is the cause, which is basically nothing else but unusually low amount of rainfall, and the effect is low production of corn. Okay, so this is a cause and effect relationship, or what we call a causality. When such a causality is present in the conclusion, it is a causal argument. Now, what are the assumptions behind a causal argument? And this is where you have to, this is the basis of the framework, so just pay attention. A causal argument contains three absolute assumptions without which a causality cannot exist. Okay, and these assumptions are absolutely the same for all causal arguments. That's a good part of it. You can apply it to all causal arguments. All right. In the other CR arguments, the assumptions depend on the given scenario, but in causal arguments, the assumptions are fixed. What are these assumptions? Let's explain with the help of this short stimulus. So, the number of vehicles being driven on the roads has increased in the last 1 year, along with an increase in air pollution levels. Okay, so basically this premise is telling us about two events, okay, that happened around the same time. We are told that along with, so there was an increase in the number of vehicles being driven, there was an increase in air pollution. Okay, these two things happened when we don't know the sequence. Without knowing that sequence, the conclusion, thus the exhaust from the vehicles must have led to the increase in pollution levels, actually draws a cause-effect relationship between the two events. Okay, and this constitutes a causal argument. Okay, so for such a causal argument where a particular event is attributed as the cause of another event, all right, what are the assumptions? What are the assumptions that the author makes while drawing this kind of relationship? Okay, so one of the first assumptions is that the event A must have happened before event B. Okay, because if event A did not happen before event B, then we cannot say that A caused B. Okay, A caused B cannot be derived. So that's the assumption, that the cause must have happened before the effect. All right. The second assumption. So, for example, in the previous case, if you can show that increase in the air pollution was present there much before the increase in the number of vehicles being driven on the road, then your conclusion will break. All right, that so that means that is an assumption that the increase happened, increase in numbers happened before increase in air pollution. Assumption 2, nothing other than event A caused event B. Now this is a central assumption behind all causal arguments. There is no alternate cause that caused event B. Okay, that means in this case the increase in pollution level did not take place because of any other reason. For example, increase in manufacturing industries could not have caused the air pollution to increase. The third assumption is there is no reverse causality. That is, the effect did not cause the cause. Now, in this argument, it is a little illogical to say that the increase in air pollution increased the number of vehicles being driven on the road. Although that is also possible. People might start using more vehicles on the road because they don't want to walk on the roads. But in any case, the third assumption is the effect did not cause the cause. Now, if you negate any one of these assumptions, your conclusion will break, your causality will break. And therefore, these three assumptions are the basis for our framework. So to round it off, in a causal argument, okay, a cause and effect relationship is there in the conclusion. Okay, the core assumption is no other cause is responsible for the stated effect. So the first step in the framework is to identify the causality. Again, be very careful by identifying the causality. You can name the cause as X and you can name the effect as Y. Again, here, guideline 1 would be X happened before Y. So if you are trying to identify the assumption X happened before Y, that means no other relationship or correlation exists between X and Y. For example, there was no coincidence. There was no common cause between X and Y. Okay. Clearly, you are establishing the sequence. One, X happened before Y. So a choice which is doing this is your assumption. Nothing else caused Y or no alternate cause. So for example, if there were any other cause possible behind the effect, the author would not have arrived at the conclusion. So you can use this. And the third is no reverse causality. That is, Y could not have caused X. So this is very simple, guys. In GMAT CR, you get very few assumption questions that contain causality. So if it is an assumption question, only these three guidelines will work. If it is a strengthened question, we will show you what other frameworks can be used after this question, which is coming up. So I want you guys to try to apply these 3 guidelines, okay, when you are trying to pre-think for that question. So here is the question. It's a GMAT whiz question, and it is a pretty difficult question, 700 plus level, I would say. So all the best to you guys. 2 minutes, get set, going. All right, I'm going to count to 10. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. And I'm going to end the poll there. Okay, first let me quickly declare the results. So 25% of you chose choice A, 7% of you chose choice B, 7% C, 33% D, and 25% E. So it's between A, D, and E is what I can see. Now, here's another question for you guys. How did you like this question? So you can answer in the chat boxes, guys. How did you like this question? How did you find this question? How did you like it? What did you feel about the question? Did you use the framework? Were you able to identify the causality quickly? And then I'm going to explain. So Harsh says tricky. Yes, Harsh, it is. Bhavesh finds it decent. Rutika says it was tough. What about the others? Yes, I'm really waiting to see your reaction to this one, guys. Harsh says it was 700 level. Yes, Harsh. Kanika says good question. Okay, great. Himanshi says question is fine, but the options are really tricky. Yes, Himanshi, that's the difficult question. The difficulty level of the question can be made in 2 ways: the stimulus or the answer choices. So Lipsa says good question. Saransh says good question. Himanshi finds it tricky. Nilab finds it tough. Rutika says she tried to use the framework. Good for you, Rutika. Initially, you might face setbacks, guys, but the frameworks really work. Otherwise, we wouldn't be pushing it so much. Yogi says multiple choices seems to be correct. Well, Yogi, this is an assumption question, so you can see only one choice will be an assumption. The others might be strengtheners. We'll see. Ashwin found the question good. Sanchit found it decent, but can't really say until it is 100% correct. Well, Sanchit, getting the question correct is no measure of its being good or bad, but I understand what you're saying. But yes, you're right. I mean, you can't really be 100% about the question unless and until you understand the solution. Ashwin finds it easy but tricky. Isaac says the pre-thinking suggested that the author was assuming a negative causality of crocodiles and mena fish. However, the answer options did not say anything about the mena fish. So Isaac, yes, the questions. He says the question was hard. Well, Isaac, a very interesting point you raised here. because this question seems to make us believe that it was about the manna fish. It wasn't, and I'm going to show you how. So see guys, this question we will establish how important it is to understand the stimulus correctly, understand the conclusion correctly, identify the exact cause and effect relationship if you want to put in the framework to practice. And the framework helps. You will see the framework takes very little time. So there's one small request, guys. I know you have a lot of questions. You're full of questions. While I'm discussing this question, just hold on to your doubts. Once I am through with discussing the use of the framework and the answer choices, you can ask me your doubts. All right. So till then, just bear with me. Just pay close attention, because nearly 25% of the questions are in one way or the other causality based. All right. So I'm just going to discuss this now. All right. Okay. So let me first show you how to read the stimulus correctly, guys. Okay. Let's take this opportunity to understand that also. 50 years ago, crocodiles were brought to the waters of Fauna County. Okay. So this premise provides us a factual piece of information. It tells us that crocodiles that did not earlier exist in Fauna County were brought to the county half a century ago. You have to understand every bit of the information. Okay. Let's read the next sentence. Excessive predation so predation is hunting, excessive hunting by the huge crocodile population. So now this crocodile population has become huge. It now threatens the manna fish, the only source of omega-3, an essential fatty acid for the fauna people. So a lot of different pieces of information has been packed into this small portion, and let's see what those are. So this premise presents the current situation. What is the current situation? And pay close attention. The crocodiles are now found in huge numbers and they are preying excessively. Okay. They are eating the manna fish in significant numbers. We are talking about excessive predation. Remember? They thus pose a danger to the manna population. Okay. The manna is the only source of omega-3 for the local people. So from this, we can also infer that the local people are probably facing a shortage in their only supply of omega-3. Probably. Okay. All right. Let's read further. The county officials plan. Okay. So now you here have a plan, and you might think this is a plan goal question, but just have patience. The county officials plan to reduce crocodile population. So probably because of the threat to manna fish, the county officials want to reduce the crocodile numbers. And what do they plan? By introducing the Runa fish. So we have another fish here, which contains a chemical highly poisonous to crocodiles, but harmless for humans. Okay, so the humans won't be harmed by it, but it will probably definitely kill the crocodile. So this sentence, the county officials want to bring down the numbers. They have a plan. The plan is to introduce the Runa fish, which is poisonous for crocodiles, but not for humans. Great. So see, the clear understanding of stimulus is very important. Let's read on. However, so a contrast here. There is a possibility the Runa will harm the small native lizards that live in the water. So the Runa fish is not poisonous to humans. And here we are told, but it could be harmful for the small native lizards that live in the water. All right. Okay. So in a way, this is telling us that the plan has a small drawback, and the Runa might cause harm to the small native lizards. All right. So the plan might have a drawback. Fine. Let's read the final sentence. The officials plan, therefore. Clearly, there is a therefore, so it's a conclusion. So the officials' plan may be good for the county people, but will obviously increase the threat to native aquatic life. All right. So here the conclusion that is drawn is the plan may be good, but it will increase the danger to native aquatic life. Now, let me ask you right at the outset. Okay, let me ask you at the pre-thinking stage here. So as of now, we'll have to have a clear understanding of this. So far that we have understood is, this is the scenario. Clear on this? Are you clear, guys? Let me just quickly ask you the poll here. Are you clear with this understanding of the stimulus so far? No confusions here? Okay, great. Let's move then. Now, the conclusion may be good for the people, but the plan will increase the danger to the native aquatic life. So the conclusion actually contains a cause and two effects. Okay, the cause is the plan to introduce the Runa. The effect of the plan, one effect is it will be good for the county people. The other is that the threat to the native aquatic life will increase. All right, clear? So thus the author wants to convey on one hand that the plan might be successful and on the other that the plan will lead to a negative impact. Now, what is the main intention of the author here, guys? What does he want to tell us? What is the thing that you need to identify the assumption behind? What is the main message of this last sentence? Can you tell me in the chat boxes? In the chat boxes. So native aquatic life includes Mena. We don't know whether the Mena fish is native or not. Nila, that information is not given to us. So we can't assume that. And Nila, that's a good question. See, the conclusion is telling us the plan will be good for the county people. So if the plan is good for the county people, it means automatically that the Runa fish cannot harm the Meena, right? Can all of you see that? Nilab? I think that was your concern, right? That the Runa might harm the Meena also. So clearly the Runa will not harm the Meena. How do we know that? Because the conclusion says that the plan is good for the maybe good for the county people. So in a way, indirectly, we kind of can take that into consideration. All right. So let's see the answer. What is the main message? Preet says he's trying to caution about the measure. Okay. So the part which is saying, which is the threat part, that is the main point. Preet, that is what you meant. Akshay says benefit for human but harmful for native aquatic life. So Akshay, my question was which point is the main conclusion? The benefit or the harm? Harsh says evaluation of the plan. So which part of the plan are we supposed to identify the assumption behind? I mean, if you look at the last sentence, okay, what is the main information that the author is trying to pass on? Bruno says Runa will harm lizards. Oh, you're very close, Bruno. Runa will harm lizards is already given to you in the premise. There is a possibility that the Runa will harm the small native lizards. That is not the main message. Himanshi says crocodile hunting Meena fish is the major concern. Is that the main conclusion? Think about it, Himanshi. Nilab, okay, you're clear about that. Sanchit, no. Ashwin says, Ashwin, assumption can be how it can stand good for humans at the same time, no other factors affecting aquatic life. Benefit, harm, good Shreya. The harm is the main message. Kanika says harm. Preet says harm is the main conclusion. Bhavesh, the likelihood of the mixed result is not the main conclusion. Kanika says increase in threat. Very good, Kanika. So why I ask this question is often we are not able to identify the exact plan. The last sentence says the plan may be good, but the plan will increase the danger. So clearly the main message is the plan will increase the threat. That's what the author is trying to tell you. And when the question is asking you, what does the plan assume? You have to identify the assumption behind this, that the plan will increase the danger to the native aquatic life. Okay. What has the author assumed when the author is saying this? Why will it increase the danger to the native aquatic life? All right. All right. So let's see. Is this so far clear? Is the conclusion clear to you guys? Let me just okay. Let me just reset the poll. Hold on a sec. Is the conclusion clear? The conclusion is the plan will increase the threat because the threat exists is already given to you. It will increase the threat. Great. And I want you to understand how important it is to, did you really think about this before? That's another question for you. Did you really think about being exact about the conclusion earlier? Did you ever think about being exact about the conclusion earlier when you were solving this question? Okay, I think you haven't got my question, guys. All right. So let me move to the next portion. Now, I'm going to put in the framework now. Okay. So the cause is the plan. The plan is the cause. And what is the plan? Introduce Runa fish poisonous to crocodiles. The effect is it will increase the threat. Okay. So again, this is the portion. Increase the threat to the native aquatic life. Which native aquatic life do we know about? We know about the small lizards. We do not know whether the MENA is native or has been introduced in the past, had been introduced in the past. We don't know that. So we will not assume anything about that. All right. The other point that Nilab raised was that if the Runa is harmful to the MENA, then the Runa cannot be good for the county people also. So that portion is cleared here. The first guideline X happened before Y. Now, in this case, the plan has not been put into action yet. Okay, they are planning to reduce it. So we can't really apply this guideline. We'll quickly move to the second guideline. No alternate cause can lead to the stated effect. Now, see how this works. The author assumes that nothing else at present causes an increase in the threat to the native aquatic life. Okay, that is the assumption very clearly. No other cause can increase the threat. Which means what? Which means that nothing else poses a increased threat to native aquatic life than the introduction of the poisonous Runa fish. I mean, think like this. What if the native aquatic life is currently facing a bigger threat than the one from Runa? Already we know Runa will harm the native lizards, might harm the native lizard. So what if the lizards are facing a bigger threat? Say, for example, what if the crocodiles are also eating the small lizards? In that case, by introducing the Runa, the lizards can be saved from a bigger threat, that is the crocodiles. Okay, and that will actually reduce the threat to the native aquatic life, and your conclusion will break. Can you see this? Let me just. Can you? Let me bring up a poll here. Hold on a sec, guys. Give me a moment. Is this explanation clear to you? When we say nothing else poses a bigger threat, an increased threat, we already know that the threat is there. That's not the conclusion. The conclusion is that introducing Runa will be an increase in the threat. So that means the author is assuming nothing else will increase the threat. Clear on this? The author is assuming nothing else will increase the threat. Okay? It means that, in other words, the small lizards are not being threatened more by anything else. Okay? Clear on this? I'll ask you once again, for those of you who were not clear, are you clear on this now? Are you clear about how we reached this assumption? Great, wonderful. So having a clear understanding of the stimulus and the conclusion is very important, as I already stated earlier. So one assumption is nothing else is a bigger threat to, or nothing else will increase the threat to the native life. All right. The third guideline, no reverse causality. The author also assumes that the small lizards will not cause any significant harm to the Runa fish. Okay. All right. You might argue that the author has already stated that it is a possibility that the Runa will harm the small native lizard. True. It's a possibility only. Moreover, the author has not ruled out the possibility that the small native lizards might harm the Runa. Okay. So if the small native lizards might harm the Runa, then actually the introducing the Runa will not increase the threat to the native aquatic life, and the conclusion will break down. Clear? So now, armed with those two assumptions, okay, we can move forward to the answer choice elimination stage. All right. So I'm just going to move to that. First choice, the officials. So a good 30% of you had chosen choice A, guys. And I'm going to show you why choice A is not correct. This is a very common trap. Okay. The officials have not been able to come up with an alternative plan. Now remember, you are looking for an assumption. Okay, does it have to be true that the officials were not able to come up with an alternative plan? It is quite possible that the officials came up with an alternative plan, they came up with a safe plan, but they decided not to use that plan. All right, so this choice is not a must be true condition, and therefore it is not an assumption. A lot of you chose this, guys. So let me ask this question. Those of you who chose choice A, are you clear why it is incorrect? Are you clear why it is incorrect? And this is where the framework for causality questions helps. You only have those three assumptions. Nothing else is an assumption on a causal argument. Only those three are the assumptions. Is it clear? Okay. So 50% of you say no, 50% of you say yes. So let me quickly explain this. Remember, we are looking for an assumption behind the plan. The plan is that the conclusion is the plan is going to increase the threat. The plan will cause an increase in the threat. All right. So here this choice is telling you the officials have not been able to come up with an alternative plan. Now, does that have to be true for my conclusion to be true? Does it have to be true that the officials had no other plan, and that is why this plan is going to increase the threat to native aquatic life? No, right? Let me reset the poll. Is it clear to all of you now? Sorry, guys. Is it clear to all of you now? It does not have to be true that the officials did not come up with a alternative plan. I can still see 50% of you have not understood this. So let me go back to this slide quickly, because a lot of you had chosen. See, understand, our conclusion is, okay, our conclusion is the plan will increase the threat. Now, for this to be true, does it have to be true that the officials had no other plan? Does it have to be true that the officials had no other plan? So let me, you can answer in the chat, guys. Does it have to be true that the officials had no other plan? Yes, Preet, it doesn't sound like an assumption. My question to all of you who chose choice A, for the plan, for the conclusion that the plan will increase the threat, does it have to be true that the officials were not able to come up with any alternative plan? Yes, Nila, it is completely out of scope, completely irrelevant in that sense. So I can see that you guys are now able to see why it is not the correct answer choice, and yet very big number, a very big percentage of you chose this as the correct answer, which is why I gave it so much time to explain. Let's move to the next choice. Controlled experiments have proved the ability of the Runa to bring down the crocodile population by a significant percentage. This supports the success of the plan. Okay, it tells us that yes, Runa will bring down the crocodile population, and that will be beneficial for the county people. But that is not a necessary condition for the plan to be successful. And remember, our major plan, our major conclusion was that the plan will increase the threat. Okay, so the success of the plan was never the conclusion. Okay, the increase in the threat was the conclusion. Okay, so this kind of strengthens the plan, but it doesn't do anything to the conclusion. All right, it's not an assumption, and therefore not the correct choice. Remember, we are looking for an assumption which will tell us that the plan will cause an increase to the threat to native aquatic life. C. The Runa fish prey on the eggs of the small lizards, thus reducing their population. So we've already been told that Runa may, there's a possibility that the Runa will harm. So this choice is just telling us how that harm can be caused. This is no new piece of information actually. It's a distortion and half-truth trap, as we call it, and therefore it's not the correct choice. Choice D was the next most favorite of this question. The crocodiles currently do not face the threat of predation from any animals in Fauna County. Now understand, are we really concerned about crocodiles first and foremost? We aren't, but let's still try the negation technique here. A lot of you were asking about the negation technique. The negation technique is simply when you are confused between two answer choices on an assumption question to negate the given choice. The negation is basically looking at the logical opposite of the given answer choice. Negated answer choice here would be the crocodiles currently do not face. The choice was face, do not face. So the negated choice will be the crocodiles currently face the threat of predation from some animals in Fauna County. Okay. Now, if the crocodiles currently face threat, what will happen? If some land animals prey on crocodiles, there will be a reduction in their food supply on the introduction of Runa. Okay. If some animals prey on crocodiles, what will happen? The wildlife will suffer actually. Therefore, no impact on conclusion. All right. If predators are aquatic animals, then there would be a reduction of their food supply by killing crocodiles. So aquatic life suffers. All right. So this choice kind of strengthens our conclusion, if at all, in a very remote manner. Can you guys, so a lot of you marked D as the correct answer choice. Can you see how D is not the correct answer choice, guys? Let me bring up the poll. Can you see why D is not the correct answer choice? Okay. All right, I kind of have got a mixed answer on that. So let me just quickly explain this once again, very quickly. See, please understand, this is not the platform to teach you negation, but negated choice is just taking the logical opposite of the given choice. So given choice was crocodiles do not face the threat of predation from any animals, and the negated choice is saying the crocodiles face threat of predation from animals. So if there are some land animals, okay, if there are some land animals that prey on the crocodiles, then introducing the Runa fish may reduce their food supply. Okay, so what will happen? What will happen? Runa fish are introduced. Runa fish will harm the crocodiles, and these animals which prey on the crocodiles, they will have less food. So maximum what can happen is the wildlife will suffer if it is the land animal. If any aquatic animals are preying on the crocodiles, what will happen then? Okay, then what will happen is their food supply will be reduced by killing the crocodiles. If the Runa fish are introduced and crocodiles are killed, then the food for the aquatic animals will get reduced, and that will hurt the aquatic life. Which means, if I take this other point, then the conclusion is strengthened, right? It will increase the threat to native aquatic life, if there is any. So this choice is therefore out of scope. Maximum it does is strengthens the conclusion. It doesn't weaken it at all. Is it now clear, guys? Is it now clear? So Preet is asking good question. Isn't the assumption also trying to bring a fact to light that hasn't been thought of? Yes, that is absolutely true. Assumption has to bring in new information. All right. Okay, great. So I think this is clear here. Everybody's understood this. I was just trying to bring up the poll, but for some reason I'm not able to do it. Okay, let me move to the correct answer choice. By now you know why this is correct. It is in line with assumption 1. For the native lizard population, excessive predation by crocodiles is not the most significant current threat. Therefore, killing of the crocodiles is actually going to benefit the native lizards. It will not increase the threat, and therefore choice E is correct. Okay, so I'm going to bring up one question quickly for you guys. It's a 700 plus level question, guys. And before I move on to that, let me just ask you whether you are all clear with this question. Are you clear with this question, guys? Great. Here comes the next question. It's a 700 plus level official question, guys. Here it is. Before that, it's a strengthener. So it's a causal question, and it is you have to strengthen the causal question. So strengtheners for a causal argument can be built along the lines of the three assumptions and a little bit more. How? So in a strengthener, definitely no alternate cause. Hold on a sec, guys. Okay. So no alternate cause for stated effect. That is some other cause. Z did not cause Y. All right. There's some problem with the PPT, so just bear with me. You can take this down. Z did not cause Y. That is no alternate cause. This we already know. If cause occurs, then effect occurs. That is, if X, then Y. So this is something that you can use for strengthening causal arguments. Wherever there is a cause, and there is an effect, then that also strengthens the causality. So you can give a parallel example of showing that if the same cause was elsewhere, the same effect took place, then that strengthens the causal argument. If X, then Y. No cause, no effect also strengthens causal argument. So if you can show any example or any choice which says that whenever the cause was not there, the effect was also not there, that will also strengthen your causality. No X, no Y. Okay. Y did not cause X. This assumption you already know. The reverse causality is not possible. And finally, if you can show any data that was used was accurate, or if you can eliminate the possibility of problems with data, that will also strengthen the causal argument. So basically, you have 5 strengtheners on a causal argument, if you look at it that way. But just forgive me because my PPT seems to be going orry, it's not obeying my order. So Z did not cause Y. If X, then Y. No X, no Y. No alternate cause. No reverse cause. So the reverse causality is ruled out and showing that data used is accurate. So with that, here is the question, and I'm going to give you 2 minutes to solve this question. This is also a 700 plus level question. Try to use the framework that I've just shown you guys, okay? Just keep that in mind when you're going through the answer choices. Okay, guys, I'm going to start my countdown. So if you haven't put in your answer choices, please do so. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. I'm going to end the poll now. Okay. So let's see, 10% of you went for A, 10% with B, 45% with C, 5% with D, and 30% with E. How many of y'all use? So it's basically between C and E. The others are still there. 45% with C and 30% with E. How many of y'all use the framework? How many of y'all use the framework? How many of y'all used the framework? Okay, great. All of y'all use the framework, which means clearly you have not used the framework in the correct manner, and you have to be very sharp about it. You will see how using the framework would have made your life easier. So what was the framework? We were looking for no alternate causes. We were looking for no reverse causality. Okay. since in this case we are strengthening the reasoning. All right, we were looking for examples where there would be no cause and no effect, or if cause then effect. All right, very clearly. So let me see. Harsh says I chose A. Isn't choice A kind of negates the reverse effect? Okay, we'll talk about that, Harsh. So again, you will see it is very important to any kind of CR, solving CR questions successfully in GMAT, if to understand the stimulus. So we will understand the stimulus first here. A certain cultivated herb, we're talking about a particular herb that is grown, is one of a group of closely related plants. So let's say if we have X, Y, Z, which are closely related plants, then this herb is a group is one of that X, Y, Z plants that thrive. So these closely related plants, okay, the herb is a part of these closely related plants that thrive in soil with high concentrations of metals. So that is applicable to clearly closely related plants, if you remember your SC classes. So these closely related plants thrive on soil with high concentrations of metals that are toxic to most other plants. So let's see. Let's say that these closely related plants are X, Y, Z, and whatnot. Okay. So what we are saying is X, Y, and Z. Okay. They grow in toxic soil. All right. This is what we are saying here. And the herb is a part of this. So the herb is a part of this X, Y, Z. But we don't know anything about the herb growing in the toxic soil so far. All right. This soil is toxic to most other plants. So let's say other plants, okay, other plants don't grow in toxic soil. This is what we have. All right. Agronomists studying the growth of this herb. So agronomists who are following this herb have discovered, what have they discovered? Now it clearly refers to the herb here. Okay, in this sentence, it refers to the herb. This herb produces large amounts of histidine. Okay, so what they are saying is this herb produces histidine and in large amounts. What is histidine? An amino acid that in test tube solutions, so in labs, this histidine renders these metals chemically inert. So it makes those metals that cause the toxicity, inert, which means histidine, okay, negates toxicity of soil in the lab experiments. All right, and this herb has that histidine. All right. Hence, the herb's high histidine production, okay, must be the key feature that allows it to grow in metal-rich soil. Now, if you follow the language of this sentence, what they are saying is the high histidine production must be the main point that allows the herb to grow. So the cause is high histidine production. This is the cause, and the effect is the herb able to grow in metal-rich soils. All right. So if I look at this stimulus, it provides some factual pieces of information. There is a certain herb that belongs to a group of closely related plants. These plants thrive in soils which have high concentrations of metals. Majority of other plants, high metallic content is toxic. The herb produces histidine in large amounts. In test tube experiments, histidine acts on the metals present in the soil and leaves them inactive. Okay, so lots of information, but you can understand it by making that short diagram kind of thing. I often do that when I'm practicing on my own. All right. Okay. So the conclusion is high histidine must be the key feature that allows the herbs to grow. Clearly, we have identified the cause is the high production of histidine, and the effect is the herb can grow in metal-rich toxic soil. Remember, in the argument, it is not given that the herb thrives in the soil. What we have understood is in the conclusion that the herb is allowed to grow in the soil, which is toxic, and that is because of histidine. In the labs, it has been seen that the histidine can negate the effect of the metals. So with that, now let's move to the using the framework. Cause production of large amounts of histidine. Effect, herb can grow in metal-rich soils, which are toxic to most other plants, majority of other plants. So the first guideline was Y did not cause X. Okay, that is, the effect did not cause X. That means here it means the metal-rich soil was not responsible for large quantities of histidine production. If at all you have a choice like this. Notice how the framework helps you. Z did not cause Y. The herb, for example, the herb does not have any other special adaptation that can help it to survive in the toxic soil. If you had a choice which said that the herb has a particular kind of secretion in the root or something like that, which makes the metal lose its toxicity, then clearly that would also be responsible for the herb being able to grow in the metal soil. So if you show that there is nothing else, no other adaptation, for example, since this is a strength in question. All right, so you can think of this. No X, no Y. So wherever, that histidine is not there in plants that cannot grow in metal-rich soils. So no X means no histidine, no Y means no plants can grow in metal-rich toxic soils. Okay, if you have any choice telling you this. Similarly, if X, then Y. That means any choice telling you histidine present in other plants that thrive in metal-rich toxic soils. Okay, that will also help. Okay, so I use only these four to think up because no such data as such is given. Is this pre-thinking clear, guys? Is this, so can you see how the framework will help you pre-think better? And is this pre-thinking clear? Do not resist using the framework, guys. You need to believe in the framework first and foremost. Great. Okay, you can use this to pre-think on causal arguments. It's really, really effective. I have some questions in the chat. So, okay. Harsh says I chose A. Okay, we'll come to that, Harsh. So Bruno says he did not get 3. Okay. So Bruno, no X, no Y means if you can come up with an option which shows that in all the plants that do not grow in toxic soils, there is no histidine. It will also show that histidine is responsible for the ability of the plants to grow in the toxic soils. Is that clear, Bruno? If you show that histidine was absent in plants that cannot grow in the soils, in those toxic soils, is that clear? Does that address your concern? Okay, I think that is clear to Bruno. Okay, great. So with that pre-thinking, let's move to the answer choice elimination. And Harsh, you can look out for this one. What does A say? A says the herb can thrive in soil that does not have high concentration, which means you are saying you're actually eliminating one of the let's say criteria. Okay, but you are not talking about the impact of histidine. All right, if you look at this choice, it's saying that histidine, the conclusion is saying that the histidine is the reason why the herb can grow. This choice is telling you that there is no high concentration of toxic metals and the herb can grow in that soil also. That means I don't know whether histidine is working or not working because there is no toxicity in the soil. All right, in a way you can say that the reason why X is being given as a cause is missing, and therefore this is out of scope. Harsh, can you see this? Is it clear to you now why A is not the answer? Are you clear about it, Harsh? Because this is telling you, this is not confirming the action of histidine. Yes, A is beyond scope, Preet, absolutely. Or what we call out of scope. Fine. So A is incorrect. Let's move to B. All right. The herb's high level of histidine production is associated with an unusually low level of production of some other amino acid, which means in the herb, because of, since we are saying is associated with, it means high histidine production reduces the production of some other amino acid. Does it tell us whether histidine is helping the plant to grow in the toxic soil? No. Okay. That does not prove whether histidine is the key factor behind the growth. So this choice is also out of scope. So very small percent of you chose A and B, small 10% for each. 40% of you, I guess, if I remember correctly, 40% or 30% almost chose C. I'm sure by now you can see why C is incorrect. C says, growing the herb in soil with high concentrations of the metal, okay, will over time reduce their concentration in the soil. What it means is if this herb is grown in the toxic soil, the toxicity of the soil will reduce. Is that what we are supposed to support? Whether the toxicity of the soil will remain? No. We are supposed to support the causality that histidine will help the herb. Histidine helps the herb to grow in the toxicity. Whether the toxicity is reduced or not, or what happens once the plant grows in the soil is not important, and therefore C is out. So, for the vast majority who chose C as the correct answer, is it clear to you why C is incorrect? Clear? C is clear, guys? Great. That's 100% on that. And that is the beauty of pre-thinking, pre-thinking with a framework, especially, you know exactly what to accept and what to rule out. Very small percent of you chose D. So D is not the correct answer. All right. The concentration of histidine in the growing herb declines as the plant approaches maturity. This is telling you the production of histidine goes down. Now, even if this is true, does it tell us whether histidine was in the first place responsible in stopping the toxicity of the soil? It doesn't. In the growing stage, histidine was present. Okay. We are concerned with that stage, the growing stage. All right. After the herb matures, what happens to the concentration of histidine is not the point, right? So this is out of scope. Let's look at choice E. A very small 24 or 25% of you chose this, guys. Okay. What this choice is telling you is the others of the closely related group of plants, so that XYZ that we are talking about, okay, they also have histidine. Notice, so what this choice does is it tells us wherever there is X, there is Y, right? This is basically if X, then Y. So we were told that the herb contains histidine and the herb can grow. We were not told whether the other closely related plants that grow in the toxic soil also have histidine or not. If you show they also have histidine, then it is strengthened that histidine is responsible for the growth. So just using that framework, just putting it there actually helps. Can you see this, guys? All of you? You can answer me in the chat. The correct answer, Ashwin, is E, because E is, as you can see on the screen, E is telling you that in those plants where histidine was present, they also grew well in the toxic soil. In this case, they are telling us about those closely related plants that thrive in toxic soil. They also contain histidine. Okay, great. So I hope today's session definitely gave you guys some insights. Do not be worried if it looks lengthy. It is very, very, very effective, guys. Take it from somebody who's been teaching for the last 10 odd years that the framework really helps. It helps me a lot tackling very lengthy questions. I can just put the data into the framework and it helps. Both framework for the plan and goal and for the causality. We also have frameworks for comparison-based questions. We have frameworks for quant-based questions. Those are a part of our course, our Pre-Thinkers Guide. Okay. So Ashwin is asking, why is B not the answer choice? Okay, Ashwin, let me just go back a bit and let me quickly explain that. And then I'm going to. So if we look at B, Ashwin, all right, B is telling us that histidine production causes, okay, histidine production reduces the production of some other amino acid. So we don't know what that other amino acid does to the growth of the herb. All right, and therefore we cannot use this choice to determine anything. All right, this choice is just telling us that the production of some other amino acid is reduced. But will that help the plant to grow if the production of some other amino acid is reduced? No. So this doesn't really strengthen the conclusion. Can you see that? Is it clear now, Ashwin? That's okay, Ashwin. You're most welcome. So great to know that, guys. I would love to get your feedback on these frameworks. All right. And now I'm going to hand over to Sakit, who's going to